Before we begin presentations, please take note of the link my colleague Kirsten just posted in the questions comments box on your right. This is a link to a short survey regarding this webinar. Your feedback is vital to ensuring we provide the most useful and meaningful events for participants. So please save this link and complete the survey at the end of the webinar. You can see here on your screen the URL to the survey as well, and we'll be posting that at the very end of the webinar for your convenience. So let's go ahead and start on the next slide with the review of our agenda and our objectives. As you know, I'm Joanne Kelly. I'm a communications consultant here at REL Pacific. Next up, we'll have Dr. Nolan Malone, who will introduce you to logic models. Nolan will talk about logic models, their components, and the benefits of using a logic model. Following Nolan's introduction, we'll have a presentation on the Education Logic Model application with Ms. Wendy Kekahio. Wendy is the Technical Assistance Lead at REL Pacific. She'll be showing you where to download the application, how to use the application, and how to save, print, share, and edit your logic model. Following Wendy's presentation, we'll show you a short video, a practitioner's perspective with Dr. Salu Hunkin-Finau, who will be giving you some background on education in American Samoa and how she used the ELM application. We'll be following that with a question and answer session, and finally a wrap-up and a survey. So to begin, we'd like to share with you an introductory video feature on REL Pacific. If you're not already familiar with the REL program or education in the Pacific, this 3-minute video should give you a good overview of what the project entails. The video was edited by Taliver Hare of REL International and will be available on our YouTube channel. We hope you enjoy the video, and you may note that the volume is a little lower than the presentation, so feel free to go ahead and raise the volume. Enjoy.
REL Pacific at REL International is one of 10 regional educational laboratories, often referred to as RELs. The RELs are funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. We serve education stakeholders in 3 U.S. Pacific territories: American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam, as well as 3 nations in free association with the United States: the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Republic of Palau, and the Federated States of Micronesia, which includes the 4 states of Chuuk, Koshrai, Pohnpei, and Yap. We also serve the state of Hawaii. At REL Pacific, we identify priority needs in the region through comprehensive reviews of education system data and reports, ongoing discussions with education agency staff, and continual contact with the field. We also support consortia called research alliances that bring together stakeholders in the Pacific to work collaboratively to address problems and questions of high priority and relevance in the field of education. Our work focuses on 4 priority topic areas: strengthening teacher effectiveness, engaging families and communities in education, ensuring college and career readiness, and optimizing data systems. REL Pacific is housed at REL International's Pacific Center for Changing the Odds in Honolulu, Hawaii. We are a private, nonprofit organization that draws upon the best of education research to translate what works into culturally conscious innovations that benefit learners throughout the Pacific. The REL Pacific region is geographically vast. The region served by REL Pacific covers 5 time zones and more than 1,000 islands, islets, and atolls. The region is mostly rural and spans a geographic area larger than the entirety of the continental United States. Although all 7 of the major entities served by REL Pacific use English as the language of instruction, 5 of those 7 also instruct in an indigenous language, such as Chamorro, Marshallese, Palauan, Chuukese, Yapese, Pohnpeian, Koshrayan, Samoan, or Hawaiian. For more information on REL Pacific, please visit our website, relpacific.mcrel.org, and sign up for our newsletter for updates on projects, events, and news.
Great. So now that you're familiar with the REL Pacific project, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first presenter, Nolan Malone. Nolan is Vice President for Pacific Operations and Director of McREL's Pacific Center for Changing the Odds. As Director of REL Pacific, Nolan guides our projects in applied research and development to address the region's most vital education needs. Nolan is one of the co-authors of the Education Logic Model application, as well as the accompanying quick reference guides. Nolan will be introducing the concept of logic models, their components, and their benefits to your programs. Nolan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As Joanne mentioned, I'll be providing a quick introduction to logic models because we find that the experience of most users varies quite a bit from being not aware of logic models or being very, very introductory to them to being expert users. So the way we thought we would start out this portion of the presentation is by asking you a question. So there's a poll feature that we'll be using on this platform, this GoToMeeting platform, and we're going to ask you a simple question, and we're going to ask you a few questions throughout the day, or excuse me, not all day, but throughout this presentation. And the question here, the first one is, have you ever created a logic model before? And the options that you have are, yes, that you've created logic model either by hand, using a computer, using various methods, or that you've never created a logic model before. So if you have an opportunity, please click one of those. It would give us a sense of what the diversity of folks are that are viewing this webinar. And it would also allow us to let the more expert folks know that we're trying to provide an introduction so that everybody's on the same page when we come around to the portion where we're describing the application that was developed by REL Pacific. So if we close the poll now, we will see that there are several people who have a lot of experience using logic models, but around a third of folks have never used a logic model before. And we're hoping that this portion of the presentation might be really, really helpful, especially to those folks, but also perhaps a bit of a refresher for folks who are just joining us who have some experience. And those of you who have experience, you'll probably know that there's lots of different ways people approach logic models. And so this primer might provide you with a foundation as we move into the application discussion a little bit later so that you'll recognize the same terms that we're talking about here in the application. So moving on to the next slide. Many of you might be wondering, well, what in fact is a logic model? What's an easy elevator speech that I could use to describe what a logic model is? And to us, a logic model is simply a tool for visually representing the structure, process, and goals, that is the logic of a program. And logic models can take lots of different shapes and sizes and forms. So many might be saying, what does a logic model look like? Well, this screen is going to start populating a whole bunch of different logic models that are publicly available, that are available on any Google search. You'll see that some of them look like amoebas, some of them look like circles, some of them look like steps, some of them look like trees, some of them look like buildings. But the one in the center of your screen has basically a lot of rows and a lot of columns. And often that's the form that many logic models take, only because it allows folks to be able to lay out everything that they need to do in a pattern that works for them. We use the same kind of format in the application that Wendy will be discussing a little bit later and presented on this next slide, where there's a series of rows that show different pieces of the logic model, and each column represents a specific component. This will make a little bit more sense as we go through what all the components are that contribute to a logic model, that might be in a logic model. Now mind you, just like logic models can take any shape or size, and you've seen some examples of that, different folks will sometimes talk about the components of logic models in different ways as well. So this primer will help you understand where some terms might be very, very similar and some terms might be a little bit different. And hopefully we can make those distinctions for you. So one thing that we were thinking of is finding out why some folks who are participating in this webinar might be creating a logic model. And we don't have a poll for that necessarily. Oh, actually we do. Sorry, I thought we were going to use the question feature of this. But the poll basically offers some ideas of why people might be doing logic models, but certainly there's a lot of different ones. The ones that are listed here say I'm doing a grant application, I'm evaluating a system reform or a system initiative, I'm trying to create a new program, so new program development, I'm trying to develop a communication device to stakeholders on an existing program, or I'm doing some strategic planning. And of course, there's several other opportunities why one would make a logic model. And if one of the reason that you might be creating a logic model isn't on this list, then please feel free to type it in the question or chat box that's on your screen, and we'll take a look at that, as well as any of those who respond to any of these options here. Again, you could have multiple reasons, multiple purposes, and what we see here from the responses to the actual response options provided is that several folks are looking to use it in grant applications. We can let you know that several folks have used that. Folks we've spoken to in the region have used it for exactly that purpose, so that they could specify clearly what their program does and what they hope to result from that. I'm looking to see if folks have put anything in the question or chat section, and I don't see very many comments, but you should feel free to use that feature at any time during the webinar to communicate with us with any suggestions or any other responses that you might have to any of the poll questions that we ask. Moving forward, start talking about the components of the logic model. Now, mind you, there's lots of different ways in which people talk about components, and we'll describe some of those resources that you might want to access to learn more about logic models a little bit later in this webinar. But there's effectively 6 different pieces that we typically use. We find commonly represented in logic models when we look through a wide array of literature around them. These include resources, activities, outputs, short-term outcomes, mid-term outcomes, and long-term outcomes. And we're going to talk about each one of these in turn, just so you can have a sense of how these might connect together. You'll notice that they're in a little bit of a diagram that shows the connectivity between them. And that diagram suggests that the resources might contribute to the activities might contribute to the outputs, and so forth and so on. And that's, again, because the folks who initially kind of pushed logic models, whether in education or healthcare or social services, felt that there should be some logical links between these things. So let's begin with resources. Resources are effectively those things that you need in order for your program to run. On this slide, you see that some examples listed include materials, funding, personnel, knowledge, skills, time, community support. So effectively, I have an idea of something that will help learners, a program in mind, and that program will consist of certain activities. What do I need so those activities can occur? The materials might be the curriculum and the textbooks. The funding might be the wages that you pay the folks who are contributing and working for the program. The knowledge and skills are key. You'd want experts delivering the materials. Community support is often really, really valuable, especially in the Pacific region, as education programs extend, don't occur just in schools, but extend into the communities. So we're curious, of those who are attending, do you have any ideas of what some more resources might be available or might be needed for any programs that you have in mind? And again, feel free to use the question or chat box in your little control panel for GoToMeeting to write anything that would be significant. For example, someone just provided an example of developing new research areas as being one of the reasons why they might want to create a logic model. And so for that, there might be some expertise in research that might be necessary to bring forward to that that program or that initiative. Space for the program was offered by another participant, which is really, really important. Sometimes we take that for granted. Oh, of course there'll be a classroom available, but space is certainly something necessary. Software, another great idea, and assignments, exactly what would be prescribed what we would be bringing to participants, learners in the program. And of course the key personnel as well. These are really, really great ideas, you guys. Sometimes it's hard, especially when you're in the beginning, to figure out what these might be. And it's important to know that there's lots of different angles that you can take for these. Peer mentors, national surveys, trainers, facilities are other suggestions that some folks have provided, which are all fantastic. These are all resources. Inputs is another term that people use to describe this one component that are necessary for the program. Let's move on quickly to the next portion of this, which is activities, exactly what the program is going to do. And some of examples of activities might be establishing certain processes, putting on specific events, taking certain actions. So activities, like the term suggests, often involve verbs. What people are doing, what exactly will you be doing that will be necessary in order to achieve the outcomes that you have in mind. And these activities can take lots of different forms as well. So although the examples we provided are rather broad and a bit vague, I'd be curious, again, if you use the chat or question feature, think of a specific activity for a program that you might have, and what that activity might look like. I think that there's some really, really good opportunities here to see what people have in mind as they're developing their logic models as well. So training. Training is a verb. You know, it's providing training to, in some cases it might be to teachers, providing training to peer mentors, something of that effect. Putting on workshops or luncheons, providing professional development, specialized training for teachers, making use of social media, instructing on social media. So these are some really, really great ideas. Coaching, another one, and case management, which is a very, very unique one in education. So as we move forward, thinking about the resources that are necessary and the activities that are going to occur, the next portion of this is outputs. Outputs is kind of a controversial term. I want to be honest about that with everybody and let you know that outputs are generally those things that tell you that your activities are happening. Those are the things that allow you to know that the activities have occurred. They're tangible, they're observable results. They're not outcomes, they're not the goals that you have for the program. They just let you know that the activities are actually occurring. And so this is often confused with outcomes, which is the next topic. And so as we, instead of asking for examples of outputs, we'll skip over to the outcomes and get a little bit deeper into that. Because there you'll see from these charts that there's three types of outcomes. There's short-term outcomes, mid-term outcomes, and long-term outcomes. And those outcomes are really, really unique to each other and often cause some confusion themselves. So these would be the changes in participants' behaviors, knowledge, skills, or organizational practices or system design, any kind of change that you are seeking to effect by performing these activities. Hopefully that's understandable and isn't too confused with outputs. Outputs just let you know that the activities are happening. Outcomes are what you hope to achieve from the activities that you're providing. For learners, that would often be that they're aware of a new topic or a new bit of information. For teachers, that might be that they have a new piece of knowledge that they can take forward in their jobs. It could be an entire change in the way they approach their job. It could be a longer-term outcome that affects not just the person who participated, but others around them, because they're transferring that knowledge or that experience to others. So on this slide, you'll see that the outcomes, we've skipped forward a few slides, sorry about that, short-term outcomes and mid-term outcomes and long-term outcomes they sound like they're very, very time delimited. And we provided some ways of thinking about it in time delimited terms, where something might be a more immediate, might be a short-term outcome, something that might occur over a longer period of time, a slightly longer period of time, would be a midterm outcome. And something that has a lasting and very, very long-term effect would be a long-term outcome. However, it's important to know that people define these things in different ways, and you could define them in different ways depending on the nature of your program. If your program's very, very short, your short and mid and long-term outcomes might look very different than a program that takes several years, for example, like getting a degree in college and so forth. So let's move on a bit and start talking about what this means for you as you're creating your logic model. So on the next slide, we'll see that there's some tips we want to share with you. Again, this is a primer to what logic models can be. And so we've given you what the components are, and we wanted you to know some tips and tricks of why logic models might be useful, and some things you might want to avoid as you're creating them, and some things that we tried to build into the application that we developed to allow you to avoid those pitfalls. So some reasons why a logic model might be useful, and I'm sorry some of you didn't see that cartoon before. It did talk about the complexity of logic models, where a logic model might wrap around an entire building because it's so long and so forth. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So why might a logic model be useful? The first bullet here says that a logic model provides a basic framework to guide the program development and evaluation. So basically it lets anybody know exactly what the program seeks to do, those activities, what it will use to do those activities, the resources, and what it hopes to achieve from those activities, the short, mid, and long-term outcomes, which is a valuable framework for anybody seeking to assess what the program is doing, whether for formal evaluation or just a stakeholder who's curious to know what's going on. The second bullet says that it also has very simple components that show how the program might be organized. It doesn't need to look like a computer switchboard and so forth. It can be very, very simple. You'll notice in some of the examples I showed originally, it showed a very, very simple step logic model where one step led to another step. It doesn't need to be complex. The third bullet says that it really, really encourages collaboration. It's a really, really valuable communication tool because it provides a common language in which everybody can be thinking about all the different moving parts of a program and helping teams organize their thinking about it. And finally, it shows how each component influences another in order to achieve the intended outcome. So based on these benefits of using logic models, we have some tips that we wanted to share with you very, very quickly. The first is that you don't need to be a graphic designer in order to do a logic model. It can be stick figures, it can be lots of words, it can be squares with simple lines between them. Please don't worry about it being a grand piece of art. That's not necessary. The next thing to keep in mind is that it's best done when you're in collaboration with others. It shouldn't be a solitary venture. And creating a logic model, working on a logic model together can be a very, very powerful way of bringing a team together with common understanding about a program. Next, the time period covered by the logic model can vary dramatically, so please don't let those things really, really intimidate you. It is generally easier to think of it in specific units of time with the expectation that you would update that, even if there's a educational program that is repeated year after year after year. You don't necessarily have to think about it across the entire lifetime of that program. You could think about it in smaller units. So don't worry about time. Figure out a time limit that works for you. Also, when you're sequencing your activities, it's important to think about the fact that some people know exactly what they want to do and what they want to achieve. So the activities and perhaps the long-term outcomes. They know that going in. So don't worry about coming up with resources before you've ever figured out your activities. You can attack any one of those components in any sequence you want. So please do not limit yourself. If you want to start with the long-term outcomes and work backwards, that's perfectly fine. If you wanted to start with activities and work in either direction, that's fine too. So there are no rules about the sequence that you have to fill in all those components. Next, we see that the size of the complexity of the program does matter. The more complex it is, the harder it's going to be to convey that, to communicate that over to folks. If you give them a logic model that's filled with lots of boxes and lines and complexity, it might turn people off more than it engages them and brings them into that community that you've created of people who understand the program and know all the moving pieces. So consider that as you're moving forward. Next, we have that variations in the importance of the inputs and activities aren't really obvious in some logic models because all of them are in the same size box, all of them are in the same font and so forth. So think about that. If there's one really key component of your program, one activity that really outshines all the others, you might want to figure out a way of highlighting that more. Otherwise, everything will look like it's weighted equally. So those are some ways that you can play with your logic model to make it a little bit more meaningful for you. And again, you can do that in any way you'd like. But the way we're going to teach you is going to be pretty straightforward. It gives you a little bit of creativity in the form of colors and so forth. But again, it should be something that speaks to you and what your vision is for this program. So moving on, I just wanted to let you know that there are some additional resources. They are in fact embedded in the application that Wendy Kikahio will be talking about shortly. They are some small, very short briefs that kind of orient folks to logic models, the components, and their different meanings. And they also have references, so you can seek out and look up how other people are talking about logic models. We call them quick reference guides as a shorthand here, and both of them are available not only in the application but also on our website, which is on your screen now. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to be able to share all this with you. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Joanne, who will prepare you for the next portion. Here you go, Joanne.
Thank you, Nolan, for that informative and engaging presentation. As you can see, there are innumerable ways to think about logic models. You know, they're useful in all manner of programs, both within the field of education and beyond. So next on the agenda, we have Ms. Wendy Kikahio. She'll be presenting on the computer application developed by REL Pacific, the Education Logic Model application. Wendy is one of the co-authors of the Education Logic Model application, as well as the accompanying quick reference guides. She currently serves as the research director at REL's Pacific Center for Changing the Odds and oversees technical assistance services for the Pacific REL program. Wendy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Joanne. We are really excited to provide this demonstration of the Education Logic Model, or ELM application. This app is something that REL Pacific began developing 2 years ago in order to promote understanding of how data fits into program design, development, and evaluation. The ELM application provides basic information on logic models, similar to what Nolan has just presented, and bridges this information with practical application. And so to start off, let's take a look at what this app is and isn't. First, it's a teaching tool about what logic models are. It is also an interactive template, as we will demonstrate to you in a few minutes, that can be filled out to create a logic model. It is meant for someone who has not developed a logic model before, or for someone with limited experience with logic models, in order to assist them with producing a simple logic model of a program or initiative. And finally, it is a conversation starter meant to be used to inform future actions. What this app isn't is a detailed program implementation or monitoring plan. So, for example, details around budget, staffing, and how you would measure your outcomes are not typically included in a logic model. Also, this app does not incorporate the many varied approaches to logic models. You might recall one of Nolan's first slides where he showed the different forms of logic models. But this app has a singular focus on one particular way to design a logic model. Next, here are some technical specifications of the app. It is a local application that is run on your individual computer. And although it operates using the Chrome browser, which is included within the app itself, you do not need the internet in order to use the application. And this was a key consideration for us when designing the app, as a strong internet connection isn't available in all parts of our Pacific region. Your logic model files are also saved directly to your computer in the location that you choose. And this is similar to how you would save a Microsoft Word or PowerPoint file. This application can be used on either a Mac or PC. And this is a free app available for download from the REL Pacific website, or educators in the Pacific region may receive the app on a USB stick. And so to start off, we would like to know if you have already downloaded the ELM application. So please let us know if you've already downloaded the app by quickly completing the poll on your screen. And we'll just give folks a few seconds to fill it out. And as the responses are coming in, it looks like the majority of participants today have not yet downloaded the app. But don't worry, it will always be available from the REL Pacific website, and we'll be showing you the link many times throughout the next hour. So to get in the app, after you download and install the app, you would click on the ELM icon that's located on your desktop, and the app will open up to this home page. There it goes. There is a brief introduction, and if you read through it, there are some suggested starting points for beginning a logic model. And there are a few key features of the application. The first of which is an audio icon button that is located on each page. These are audio clips that will provide you with instructions to complete your logic model. And they were recorded by our colleague, Kealoha Fox, so you'll be able to hear her lovely voice throughout the application. The second feature to note is the menu bar, which is located along the top. And this is how you would go ahead and navigate throughout the application. And we'll go through each of these pages, beginning over on the far right with the contact page. This is the contact page where users can contact us by sending us an email or calling our office number. We really welcome all feedback and want to know what's working for you, what isn't working, and any features that you would like to see in future versions. This is essentially a beta version, and as we all know, with all technology, we need user feedback to help us improve and enhance it. The next page is the About Us page. And this provides information about the development of the tool. As we've mentioned, this was developed under the Institute of Education Sciences as a part of the Regional Education Lab for the Pacific. It was created through a partnership with 3 organizations: REL Pacific Center for Changing the Odds, Island Innovation on the island of Maui, and the Curriculum Research Development Group out of the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And a huge, huge thank you to our developer, Krishna Narayan, who is also on this webinar and played a critical role in this project, and also to the entire project team that contributed their time and expertise. The next page provides some frequently asked questions around topics that we thought users might have. And it covers topics such as installing the application, how to get started, how to use the app, what to do after creating your program, and how to contact us if you still need more assistance. The next page, the Additional Resources page, provides users with information on logic models that have been written by other organizations. So if you want to learn more and become an expert on logic models, here are some resources that might be helpful. And we have also gone ahead and gained copyright permission to include some of the resources directly in the application in case you aren't connected to the internet. And here's an example of the Kellogg Foundation Guide. Finally, we have a reference guides page, and this page contains what we at REL Pacific have written about logic models and program monitoring. These guides are 2 to 4 pages each and provide some basic information about logic models and definitions of each component. And here again is an example of one of the quick reference guides. Okay, so now for the fun part of actually creating a logic model. Through this application, you can begin a logic model in 2 ways. The first way is to click on New Model, and then to type in some basic information about your program. The second way to begin is to use a logic model that you might have previously created or to use one that a colleague has created and sent to you. And so to do this, you would click on Existing Model, and you would navigate to where you have saved the logic model to your computer. For this demonstration, we'll open up an example that we have previously created. And from here, we'll just click on Next. And once you click on Next, you'll be taken into the part of the app where you can begin creating your logic model. You'll see a sub-menu appear below the main menu that lists the logic model components. And this page begins with resources, where you can enter your program's resources in the boxes over to the left. And along the right side, you can expand the instructions menu to read a description of what resources are and some guiding questions for your program team to think through. So for example, underneath the resources page, you might consider how much money is needed to implement your program's activities, or what materials and equipment are needed. Below this are examples of resources for 3 different programs. And again, audio is provided on each page, and these instructions and examples are also available as a PDF in case you're like me and you want to print it out and have it next to you on your desk. You're able to do that. You can navigate through these logic model components by either clicking the Next button on the upper right of each page, and the app will take you in order through the different components. Or what often happens is that users might know one aspect of their program really well. And so, for example, program planners usually know their program's activities or what their program does. And so they might want to begin here in the activities section. You'll see that each page is structured exactly the same way, with the boxes to enter information on the left and descriptions and examples over on the right. Users may also find it easiest to begin on the far right with outcomes and to think about what they hope to happen as a result of their program. And so in this example, the program seeks to increase the number of students who enter into post-secondary education or the workforce, and decrease the number of students who are placed into remedial courses. You can really begin however you want and wherever you want. And you should do this in the order that you find the easiest for you. Feel free to navigate by clicking between components or by going in a left to right sequence. In addition to the audio and text instructions, we have also built in a tutorial in case users aren't quite sure how to use the app, or if they missed this webinar. And so you would just click on the tutorial button and a separate screen will open up. It will literally walk you through step by step basically what we are demonstrating here today. You can navigate this tutorial by using the arrows to the left and the right of the screen. And we recommend that you don't use the browser buttons, as all of the navigation controls are included directly within the app itself. To close the tutorial, just click on the X for the tutorial tab and you can switch back to the app. Or you can always leave the tutorial open while you work within the app. And so getting back to the logic model, at this point, users will have filled in all of the components, the resources, activities, outputs, and outcomes will have been defined. And now we can start to think about the relationships between these components. By clicking on Create Connections, you'll see your entire logic model laid out on a single screen. For this part, the main question to think about is, how does one component affect another component? To draw a connection between boxes, just click on the first box and then click on the second box. And you can also click on the arrow in the box to change the color of the line. In this example, high school students will conduct monthly college and career readiness courses and provide peer support between high school and college students. The college and career counselors will design and develop curriculum, and also work with high school students to conduct monthly career readiness courses. We'd like to give you a chance to help us create the connections between the last resource and any activities. So using the chat question box in your screen to the right, feel free to just type in which activities you think would result from the curriculum and materials resource. And we'll just give folks a few more seconds to type in some answers. And so we're just looking at the very last box, the third resource that says College and Career Preparation, Curriculum and Materials. Great. So it seems like folks are indicating that it could actually connect to more than one activity. And this is an example program, and so there isn't necessarily a correct answer. In the case of this program, we had hoped that the curriculum and materials would help to conduct the monthly courses and provide one-to-one peer support. Once users have finished creating connections between components, they can go ahead and save their logic model by clicking Save at the very top and specifying the file name and where you want to save the file to your computer. The Save button is located on each page, so be sure to save your logic model as you are creating it. Finally, you can go to the View Print button and see what your completed logic model looks like and print it out or save it as a PDF. The print settings will look differently depending on your individual computer. And so for our settings here, we would actually go to the destination in order to save it as a PDF, which I think is showing up right now on your screen. And at this point, you'll have a completed logic model that depicts how your program operates, what you need to implement your program, and what you and others hope to happen as a result of your program. You can share your logic model with colleagues, include it in a grant application, or use it to further define how you would monitor and evaluate your program's outcomes. All of this is available as a free download from our REL Pacific website. And also on the website, you'll find a handy user's guide that lays out all of the actions that we have just demonstrated. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for guiding us through the actual computer application. The ELM app certainly makes creating logic models simple and easy to share with colleagues. So to wrap up our webinar, the presentation part of our webinar, we'd like to offer a perspective from a practitioner in American Samoa. So before we do that, let's get a feel for where all of our attendees are joining us from, whether you're here from somewhere in the Pacific, somewhere on the continent. Please go ahead and take a look at your comments and questions box on the right and enter in for us where you are joining the presentation from. So we have people from Ohio, welcome, New Mexico, Eugene, Medford, Texas, California, Austin, San Francisco, Saipan, CNMI. And of course, we have quite a few people joining us from Honolulu. Earlier, we had people reach out from the University of Maryland. We had Celia from the California State University, Fullerton. We spoke with John earlier from the Department of Education here in Honolulu for a surprise preview of our webinar. Thanks for joining us today. So as you can see, we have a very diverse group. We have participants from all over the continental United States as well as the Pacific. So our next presenter is actually from American Samoa, which, as you can see here on your screen, is located over 2,000 miles away from Honolulu, Hawaii, which is where our offices are located. Our next presenter is Dr. Saluhunkin Finau. She is the Director of Education in American Samoa, and she'll be giving us the practitioner's perspective through a pre-recorded video. Dr. Hunkin Finau is currently using the ELM application to create American Samoa's first 5-year strategic plan in the history of the Department of Education. This video also provides a brief overview of the American Samoan education system. My colleague Kirsten will be cueing the video for you in just a moment, and we hope you enjoy it.
Education in American Samoa is basically an American school system. Because it is a territory of the United States, our school system is patterned after the American school system. It's just a little variance though. Our elementary school run from kindergarten to grade 8. We don't have a middle school. We don't separate the teen years or the adolescent. They are all on the same campus with the elementary children. Then we have our regular high school, grade 9 to 12. 12,000 students are in the public school system, of which I direct, and 900 teachers help teach children K to 12. We also have an early childhood education, which is also called Head Start. That's administered by the government, but fully federally funded. We also have a special ed division, also fully funded by the federal government. And then the rest of the schools are private schools. So in total, about 3,000 students attend school in the private school, religious and otherwise private schools. So the curriculum is an English curriculum, but 90+% of our children speak Samoan as their first language. That's the challenge that we face. And 90% of our teachers are Samoans. They speak predominantly Samoan, have been trained in our local community college there, and they attend accredited university outside of Samoa. Most of them graduate from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. One of the problems in Samoa, and I'm sure it's pretty much the same out in the islands and the territories, that when a new leader comes in, everything changes. People change, things change, ideas change. So we never really get to see something through to make sure that it works for us. This I wanted to change, and with the help of my deputies and staff, we sat down on our own as educators and start drawing up our 5-year plan. The staff wrote up our first 5-year plan in the history of DOE American Samoa. So here comes the logic model. Dr. Herman comes in and he turns everything around. You got to do this the other way around. You got to look at your resources, you got to look at your personnel, you got to look at your money, then talk about it. I said, okay, looks like we're doing this thing backwards. When we started doing it together as a group, everything fit. Now my staff's doing it on their own. They not only have the overall plan for the 5-year, they're taking the instrument and they're doing, for the curriculum people, they're taking every content area and mapping it out for 5 years. For the teacher quality, they're taking each of the 3 components and they're mapping it for 5 years. So one division may have an overall logic model, it's a tool, and then they have their sub-plans, which lead up to 5 years. So it's marvelous. They love it. They can use it. They can see their work, and they'll know the pieces that are missing that they need to go back and talk about it. We like it because it was easy to understand, easy to insert what we already had on our draft plan, and it's just a different way of looking at it, but it makes sense. It's easy to follow. Even people like me can follow it. So if I can follow it, everybody else in the territories can follow it, and it's going to be very helpful. It's helpful because you're looking straight at components that are so important to the end product of where you want to be. This plan is going to go to the governor, is going to go to our legislator. This thing is going to be legislated using the logic model. The 5-year plan on the logic model will be legislated. The whole concept of planning for 5 years and 5 years until the eternity to help our children. And I think for the islands, because we normally don't plan that far ahead. I mean, culturally, we're talking about today and tomorrow. Okay, we're not talking about 5 years. Who knows where you're going to be 5 years, but you have something down. And most important is that the plan will help direct our work to helping our children. I think that's the bottom line, is that the plan is going to help us look at what are we doing? Is it making positive impact on the learning of children? And is it making an impact on helping our teachers become more effective teachers? And what we're teaching, and the assessments, and the resources. I often tell my staff, hey, we're very blessed to have a lot of resources. We got to learn how to use it wisely so that it makes the greatest impact on the learning of children. We have to make sure that they're ready for the global world, the digital world, even though they live on a rock. At the same time, we want them to remember their Samoan, but they need to be able to survive. And how do we do that? We have to have those plans with those children in mind so that it's well planned, it's meaningful, it'll be so much more effective rather than leaving it to chance. We cannot assume anything anymore. We cannot assume and say, hey, it's going to work without really knowing. It's got to be better planned. So for us right now, the logic model is a very logic path to go.
Great. So we'd like to open the floor now to you, our participants. So if you have any questions or comments about logic models or even the ELM application, please feel free to type them in at this time. Both Nolan and Wendy are here to speak with you for the next about 20 minutes of our program and are happy to field any questions that you have.
Thank you, Joanne. I do want to acknowledge that several of you have been sending in questions, and we want to make sure you know that you were heard. I did want to mention that somebody asked lots of people have asked whether or not this webinar will be archived, and I did want to assure you that yes, it will be archived. We'll also post these slides and the actual webinar to our YouTube site as well. That information will be shared, and I want you to know that you can go to that same REL Pacific website to find directions where to grab some of this stuff. Some folks also asked some unique questions. They noticed numbers above some of the data entry fields in ELM, and I wanted to let you know that those numbers signify how many characters you have to fill in each box. And we do that because it really, really does require you to be kind of crisp and brief in the way you describe things. Otherwise, your logic model is going to look really, really complicated and go around the corner of the building and stuff like that. So that's what that little character counter is for on each of the fields in the ELM that you're entering. Also, we wanted to let you know that somebody asked about whether or not fidelity of delivery is a potential output, and I wanted to, brings it to a different kind of level when you're talking about logic models. Often issues around fidelity are associated with something that people call process outcomes, basically how the actual what kinds of outcomes you want to get from the program. I think some can be outputs, whether or not something occurred and whether it occurred properly, and then there might be some kind of outcomes associated with that as well. So I just wanted to respond to that person to let them know that fidelity can cross a strange boundary between outputs and outcomes, and there's some different theories about that, different schools of thought, I guess I should say, about that. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about that in more depth if you'd like to follow up with us. There's also a question about whether outputs need to be measurable, and I wanted to respond to that. And most often it's really good if outputs are measurable. So how many students actually arrived and took the class that day? How many hours were invested in the training that was provided? How many books were distributed or materials were distributed to folks is often the way outputs are framed. So that's a really, really good question about whether things are measurable. Again, this lays a strong foundation for any kind of future accountability or assessment or evaluation of the program. Finally, somebody asked whether or not they could make adaptations. These are from earlier questions, so I'll get to the newer questions in a moment. Somebody asked if they could make adaptations, like they didn't want to call activities activities, and they wanted to add another column that talks about the vision that's going on. So I wanted to let you know that you can adapt a logic model to be anything you want. For the ELM, unfortunately, you're stuck with, unfortunately or fortunately, the very, very simple approach that we laid out for you. However, you could take that same approach and apply it to a piece of paper with pen and paper, or you could put it into another program like Word or PowerPoint and create boxes yourself. And you could create as many columns and rows as you see fit. It really, really should be something that speaks to what you believe your program is doing. And we would not want you to be constrained necessarily. But remember that tip I shared about keeping it simple, trying to keep it something that could be easily communicated to others. As long as you're doing that, I think you'll be fine. Some of the other questions that have been asked have been about the links that we've been sharing. We know that on the screen, GoToMeeting, you cannot copy the link and drop it into your browser. We have posted the links a few times in the chat and question box, and you can scroll up to find where that link, those links might be, and click on them. But we'll still keep adding it to the question and chat box for you so that you can grab it as you see it and click it, and perhaps it'll open up your browser and you don't have to worry so much about all the different characters and stuff that are in the link trying to type it. Somebody wrote that more complex models can create a mess once you use the arrows. Can you suggest alternatives to arrows? Well, in fact, one of the features in the education logic model application that we didn't discuss today for the sake of time was the fact that you can provide a shaded box around a group of entries, if you wish, to kind of collapse them together in a unique way. I wanted to let you know that to do that, it's described very, very clearly in the tutorial and in the instructions how to do that. And it provides you some ways of grouping the boxes in ways that might be meaningful for you. There are other ways that folks have done it as well. The lines tend to be the most common way of doing it, which is why the ELM application actually contains only lines in it. We did add the colors because we thought that when you have so many lines, it can get very, very messy. So what we've done with several folks that we provided some assistance to as they develop their logic models is help them provide select color coding schemes that work for them, that make the pathways a lot more recognizable from resources to activities to outcomes. That's something that you might want to consider. Another question that just came up is that, sorry, we're looking at multiple screens, just trying to make sure that we're getting all of your questions. I apologize, you guys. The comment came up about teaching a course, a graduate course, and that this might be a useful tool. I did want to let you know that we've had several folks reach out to us and talk about how they have used the tool to win funding in their grant applications by being able to lay out really, really clearly what it is they're proposing and how they believe that their actions that they're proposing will lead to the outcomes of the funder that the funder has expressed a wish to achieve. And that's been very, very, very useful for some folks. It's also been used in the Pacific by some of our education systems to help solidify their strategic plans, as Dr. Hunkin-Finau mentioned, but also some of the bigger initiatives that they take on, which often consist of lots of small programs. And by being able to put each of those programs into a logic model and then collapse them up to see how they're achieving their larger vision can sometimes be very, very helpful as well. I'm looking to see what additional questions there might be. I see several more that have come in as I've been speaking. I apologize for any delay in responding to them. How do you handle modeling programs such as an educational intervention that involves teacher training, but also the actual delivery of the intervention in the classroom? Would there be outputs of training and the actual classroom intervention, or would the intervention have to follow as outcomes from the teacher training? I think that's a really, really good point. And what's nice about mapping it out in a logic model is if you're unable to make that connection between those different kinds of activities to the shared outcomes, then sometimes it does require that they actually either reside in two separate logic models that might have some shared resources, might have some shared outputs, but because the activities and the outcomes are so specifically linked within each of those two things, keeping that separation might be a little bit better as you're trying to communicate to your principals, to your board members, to your central office folks. So that's something to consider. We've actually had that with some folks that we've worked with where they had an outcome and there were no lines actually leading to that outcome. And it really, really forced that discussion. Well, if none of the lines are actually leading to this, we see nothing prior that leads to this outcome, is it really, really an outcome of this program that we're talking about? And that was a really, really good, fruitful effort for them, a process that was helpful for them to revise exactly what their program was doing. Somebody asked if you can export into WEL. I combined Word and Excel. Well, if you can export into Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, and that's a really, really good question. We did want to make this as useful as possible. Presently, the logic model can only be printed to a PDF. However, we have had this question asked before, and we are exploring it. I can't make any promises, but it is something that we're exploring. The neat thing is that you can always cut and paste if you have the ability to do so from your PDF into those programs, whether there's boxes you've created in those programs and so forth. So again, we hope that our application is certainly useful and helpful to you. However, if you find that you need to expand or make adaptations to it, then you have lots of opportunities to do so with other programs if you wish. Those other programs, unlike ours, will not guide you through what the process is and what those components are, but it might provide you the latitude to create more components or to add more boxes to each column. Another question is, what period of time should we consider in terms of achievement of short-term versus midterm versus long-term? That's a really, really good question, and I want to thank you for asking that. I'd like, even though those three terms, short-term, midterm, and long-term, are clearly associated with time, please do not limit yourself in thinking about it as just time. So for some people who do treat it as time, they would say short-term might occur during a program or almost upon completion of the program. Midterm might be something that you would see, something you would observe after a program is completed, and long-term would be something that is further out, several years out. That's just when you're talking about clocks and calendars. However, there's other ways of thinking about this. Short-term is often also in what you're observing. It's considered the word ASK, A-S-K, is a small acronym that means attitudes, skills, and knowledge. So lots of people consider short-term to be changes in attitudes, skills, and knowledge. When that occurs, they consider that a short-term outcome. For midterm, what they would observe would be changes in behavior, not just awareness and knowledge, but in actual behavior. They consider that midterm. And in long-term, it's a change in worldview, where it's not only a change in their own behavior, but it's a way that they're walking through life and perhaps transmitting exactly what their new behaviors are to others, family members, community members, classmates. So there's different ways people talk about short, mid, and long-term, and it's not just limited to clocks and calendars. And so it should be something that really, really makes sense to you and really, really fits with what your program does. Great question. Thank you for asking that. Another question is, how do we handle modeling programs? Excuse me, that was already answered. Excuse me. Somebody asked if an output for teachers can be an input for students. For example, one activity, excuse me, for my arm, everybody, one activity is to train teachers in differentiated instruction. The teachers then create lesson plans for differentiated groups of students. That's a really good question. It kind of gets to the other one, how one activity might actually be for teachers, but it's a necessary input for the others. I would try modeling it and seeing how it works and seeing if it isn't something that can occur. It doesn't mean that everything has to connect in a single logic model, but there might be swim lanes. That's a way that some logic models are set up, where there's specific lanes where certain things are happening. There's also lots of strategic plans and other planning tools that use swim lanes. You might consider that there might be some lanes, some boxes that are aligned with each other, but not necessarily interacting with the others. However, they might be happening simultaneously to what's going on in the other areas. So that might be a way that you might want to treat it in a single logic model. In other cases, you might want to consider separating the two logic models. More questions about posting the URLs, and I'm looking through the questions right now And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom in case any new questions have come in. Okay. And I did want to give you an update that they have been posting the URL in the comments box, but we're not necessarily seeing it. So we're going to be working on that, and at a minimum, we'll try to get it before you guys leave today. Somebody asked how much variation there is from an implementation plan and timeline and the logic model. That's a really, really good question. As Wendy pointed out, it's not necessarily intended to be a detailed plan, but it is intended to be a representation of how the program is expected to work. There are tools to actually monitor and address actual implementation and meeting certain timelines and so forth. And the logic model can certainly inform that, but it's not necessarily a project monitoring tool. We do have an associated tool called the Program Outcomes, Measures, and Targets, which does provide a bit of what you're talking about in monitoring progress towards stated outcomes, but not necessarily implementation. And we will have a future webinar that deals with that associated sister application to the ELM in the future. Somebody asked if we're going to send out the PowerPoints to folks, and again, we'll try to put them up on our website so that people can actually grab from those slides as needed. And we'll also send you, well, that will be on the URL, but there will also be a follow-up email to this webinar to each attendee, providing some of this information to you. And if we have room on it for the PowerPoint, it's actually quite large, so it might crowd some folks' inboxes. But if we have the capacity to send that PowerPoint to you directly, then we'll try to do so. Otherwise, we'll give you a link where you can grab it directly from our website. And another question is, I'm sorry, I'm reading at the same time. Do you see any question? Okay. My colleague Wendy is helping me monitor these questions, everybody. So I appreciate your patience. You guys are really, really awesome. And these are really, really good questions. Some things that we just were worried that we didn't have time to squeeze into the presentation, all of you are asking about, which is really, really wonderful. So we're really, really happy with the response you guys are having to the logic model webinar. And again, although you're asking questions now, any feedback that you have once you download the application and once you start using it is certainly welcome. We only seek to improve and help out, and it can be really, really difficult. You'll see that I think Joanne has been good enough to put the survey link up online again, up on the PowerPoint as you guys are asking questions. And she'll also try to paste it into a chat or question thing. We've been having difficulty, and I think it's because there's so much activity in the chat question piece already. So scrolling down.
This is Wendy. While Nolan's kind of reading through some of the questions and comments, I just wanted to give a quick tip. If you are thinking about, hopefully you are thinking about downloading the application, depending on the time that you choose to download it, it may take a little bit of time to download if there's a lot of traffic on the website at that time. So you might want to, if you notice that it's taking a long time, you might want to stop the download and come back at another time. We've noticed that when there are news flashes sent out about the app, a lot of people might go to the website and try to download it at the same time and kind of slow down the download speeds. The other thing to mention is that everything that we've demonstrated today, we've demonstrated the app that is currently on the REL Pacific website. We have been working to update the app. So actually sometime this week, I think I can safely say by this Friday, we're going to actually be releasing a new version. It won't look drastically different, but what it will have are a few more additional resources. So one of our other regional education labs, actually out of the Northeastern Islands, has also done a lot of work around logic models. And so we've been talking with them, and we've included some of their resources within this application. And so the version that we'll be releasing this week will include those resources. I'm going to turn it back to Nolan if there's more questions.
There was a really, really good question that was offered by one of the participants, and I would be remiss if I didn't address it. Sadly, she has left the webinar, but she asked, what's the difference between a logic model and a theory of change? That's a really, really great question. And some of the additional resources that we point people to in the logic model application, that one section on the menu bar that says additional resources, in which we gained copyright permission from all these authors to include the PDFs. Several folks do talk about the overlap between logic models and theories of change. Theories of change are obviously something that's a bit grander and a bit more comprehensive, and logic models are a way of actually expressing theories of change. Again, logic model might be the visual, the theory of change might be something that's a little bit more complex, and there's lots of different ways people do situate the two next to each other, sometimes in an overlapping Venn diagram. I do know that it is discussed in several of the additional resources that we provided, but it's a really, really great question, and those two terms are often used interchangeably in some circles. So thank you for asking that. I think that some folks have been having trouble with the survey. It looks like, wow, there's a lot of things coming in. So our folks are looking into that. Thank you so much, you guys. Our folks are looking into it. If we can fix that issue, then we'll certainly send you in the email the correct link to the survey. But we really, really appreciate the fact that so many people are trying to do that survey now. You guys are awesome, really. Thank you very much for doing that, because sometimes it's difficult, especially in these kinds of venues, for folks to be able to access that link and complete the survey. So the fact that so many of you tried is really, really fantastic. We'll get the proper link out to you in an email, so that you have an opportunity to provide us the feedback that we're seeking. I do know that some folks are saying that it'd be neat to see what kinds of feedback we're getting and what kinds of questions the participants are asking. And so we're going to try to see what we can save and be able to post from this, so that everybody has an opportunity to hear what folks are saying and what kinds of questions they're asking. They're really, really good questions, and I think that everyone would benefit from seeing how other people have approached logic models and what kinds of questions that they're asking. So we'll try to share that as well. Again, this will be archived, and the archived version will be available, and we'll also try to post this recording to a YouTube site as well, so that people can follow along at their leisure. So if you have any colleagues or friends, you should feel free to share it with them as well. Somebody asked if we could post some examples from the field to share with ELM users. That is something that we've been trying to do, actually. We're trying to gather up some examples of real programs that folks have been using the ELM to do. We've gotten permission from a few folks to be able to share some of their doing, while kind of obscuring any identifying information, just so folks can see exactly how their colleagues in different states and different entities in different countries might be approaching it. So we hope to actually post some of those things to our website at some point. Right now we don't have as many examples that folks were willing, because so many folks are working on it, and they're a little bit hesitant to give up something that they're not quite done with. But as folks continue to finish, we'll try to get those examples up, posted to our website, so all of you new users could see how people have been able to use the ELM for all different kinds of programs. Great question. Thank you. Seems like we may have run a little bit dry, and we are at the end of our allotted time for Q&A. So if it's okay with you guys, I will pass it back over to Joanne so that she can maybe close us out. And thank you on behalf of Wendy. I do want to thank you for all of your great attention and the great questions and suggestions that you've made. And without further ado, Joanne.
Thank you so much, Nolan and Wendy, for all those very helpful answers. To wrap up our webinar, we have shown the link, as you can see. If the link isn't working for you, not to worry. We'll be sending the link out in an email. Thank you again, as Nolan mentioned, for taking the time and being so proactive in seeking out to fill that survey out. We really appreciate it. So we hope to see you back for our next webinar, which is in just 2 days. It's Impacting Teacher Quality Through Human Resource Alignment. That's on Wednesday, June 25th at 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. As always, you can register for any REL Pacific event on our website, and you can see the URL in orange just there. And finally, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to reading